Hi, I'm MrByZ, and today I'm going to take a look at the evolution of Slave One vehicle, from the vintage release to Jango Fett to Giant Slave One to Tiny Slave One. So we're going to take a look at all the different Kenner and Hasbro action figure scaled Slave Ones. So we start where Slave One all began, with the vintage Slave One. Of course, it had vintage box. This is actually one of the few vintage boxes I have. But vintage Slave One, this is not a vehicle I had as a kid at all. It never had an impression on me. Number one, I had a hard time seeing the vehicle from the movie in this. I mean, look at this box for a minute. The way the picture is on there, it's hard to see Slave One. You don't see so much of the sloping front end of it coming down. It doesn't have quite all the angles there, and because it's a reduced scale vehicle. And then you think of Slave One as having that red bottom, and we have a couple kind of pinkish stickers here. Maybe they were red back in the day, although they look kind of pink, maybe pink maroon there or something. But I just had a hard time seeing the vehicle in this. Obviously, I picked one up eventually. There's several cool features on this. One is when you raise it up, the wings automatically come up. And along with that, this is hard to see in there, but the cockpit, the chair in there will move. I'll show it more on the modern one here in a second. It has a cargo area that opens up. Now, back then, they really didn't do a whole lot with detail inside some of these vehicles. It was just kind of open, so you can put figures in there. You can see the cockpit. Now, when I raise it up, I thought it moved. Oh, this moves it. That's right. I'm sorry. I thought the cockpit moved with the wings. It doesn't. That's some of the other vehicles. This one moves. You have a lever right here. It's been a while since I played with this. So you just bring that down, and you can latch Boba Fett in there, whoever you want to drive Slave One. And then it has a little ramp that comes off, but that you can just lower on down, so that Boba Fett can load. Han and Carbonite. Now this, I don't usually include figures with vehicle reviews, but this Han and Carbonite accessory, I mean there's no figure here, came with the Slave One, and this is the first time a Han and Carbonite was ever made. We didn't get an actual figure until the Power of the Force line, of course. Now, one of the interesting things is on the detail, his shirt is actually more like his Empire shirt, whereas the actual Han and Carbonite prop is more like his A New Hope shirt, which is always kind of weird. But clearly on the figure, they, I guess, were taking the mold idea that they had for the actual figure to make this, rather than the actual prop, when they looked into that. But, it's a decent vehicle for its day. And, of course, Slave One doesn't end there. There's lots more Slave Ones to come. So in 1996, with the new line coming out, the Shadows of the Empire line hits, and we get their first Slave One vehicle with the modern line. Now, it is just a repaint of the vintage. It's the exact same mold, just repainted. A little more detailed. You can see a lot more red. This does look more like Slave One to me. All of a sudden, you can see that red. It's like, oh, yeah, that is Slave One. I see that there. Same features. The door opens and shuts. You can bring up the cockpit chair and back down if you want. The wings, I guess that's what you call them, move. Just please excuse the wire on the back of this. I do hang a lot of ships, and I just packed this one up with the wire. These are about to actually get rehung in my new collection room. So just to show you, one of the things I didn't show on the vintage one is it has this handle so that you could hold it. Now, obviously, Slave One flies around like this and not like this. It lands like that, but flies around like this. So they put the handle back here. As they did with a number of the bigger ships, you'd get kind of a handle that you could play with on the vintage line. Now, this also came with a Han and Carbonite accessory, which is, again, is just a remold of the vintage one. So not a whole lot new to say here, because it is it's the same thing, just a redeco. Now, I think it looks a lot better than the vintage one. The vintage one, of course, it's vintage, so people love it. But I do think the Power of the Force 2 Shadows of the Empire one does look better. But this is still not the last Slave One we're going to get. So the next Slave One we actually get in 2002 for Attack of the Clones, the new Jango Fett's Slave One. So this has an all-new paint job on it, and it is not just the vintage mold retooled. So with this vehicle, at first you think, oh, this is just a repaint of the old one. But if you look, there are a lot of differences. As you can see, it's a little sleeker, a little more accurate to the film. I talked about that curvature and the angle down here on the bottom, and you can see that a lot more on this. You know, when I knew they were doing Slave 1 for Attack of the Clones, I figured it would be just that repainted. But they went all out for a whole new mold. Lots of different features. Number one, the cockpit now opens from the front. And as we saw in Attack of the Clones, there are multiple seats in here. And so we actually have 3 seats in there. So that, you know, Jango and Boba could all be in there, and the figures just stand. Now, gone, though, on this is a cockpit that moves. This cockpit will not move down because there's no cargo area or anything. In fact, this was done to be more movie accurate in that it has lots of weapons. So, I don't know if this was exactly movie accurate. Having missiles right here, but we got a bunch of missiles that'll fire out here. Of course, we have the movable guns just like before. Sorry, that's not a button. It's a little reveal thing. So, we turn that and we get the tracking device that Obi-Wan throws on there. And while not movie accurate, we have a destroyed tracking device on it if we move it again. But no, the button I was actually thinking about is on the back. Now the back is, of course, completely redone. We still have a handle here. You can see some missile slots there and a couple different buttons. Now this button right here, it controls dropping bombs or probably more sonic charges. So I'll try to make this happen. So I'm going to press this button here. And there it is. So we get these little red, I'd assume these are more sonic charges. And they all load in up here. Which is why we don't have a ramp or anything opening, because there's all sorts of things in there. This right here controls these. So you pop them out and you can fire them off one at a time. Like so. Now in 2004, in the original trilogy collection, we get a re-release of that Jango Fett Slave 1, that one right there, but done as Boba Fett Slave 1. This was a Target exclusive. You can see my box is all beat to heck because it was on clearance when I bought it. But let's take a look at this one. So this Slave 1 came with a Boba Fett figure, which was just a re-release, basically, the 300th Hasbro figure. But here we have the Slave 1. Now this is just a repaint, slight retool of the Attack of the Clones Jango Fett Slave 1. Still has the same cockpit idea. Still has the little missiles here. But we now have these added guns on the side, which I don't know why these are here, because this was not in any movie that had Boba Fett Slave 1. It's got a nice paint job, though, to update it. Gone is also the bomb dropping. There's no bomb area here. No button. We still have the lever for all that. But other than that, it's a repaint. There's nothing else new about it. Oh, there's one new thing. I guess I'm missing a piece here I gotta find. But this right here, it was like a little extra piece. Again, I don't know why. Some of this seems like it should be more on Jango Fett's. They added pieces that don't exist on Boba Fett. Now you can take these off and put them back on if you want. It's kind of a nice little touch there. But kind of weird that they added a couple pieces that you didn't need and took away the bomb feature and didn't add like any feature that was very Jango Fett. One thing I didn't point out, or sorry, Boba Fett. One thing I didn't point out here is it has like a little targeting deal on the cockpit cover. It's mostly because you see them targeting Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones for the other one. One other thing I didn't mention is that the wings still turn. They just don't do it automatically. You have to do it yourself now. But just so you can see, here is both of them. Same thing. It's just the same model, just slight retools. Now in 2010, we get a Toys R Us exclusive of a big Jango Fett, well, kind of Boba Fett Slave 1. This is actually the Clone Wars Slave 1. It's put out in Clone Wars packaging, and it came with a Mace Windu Jedi Starfighter as well. Now this is a bigger Slave 1 than what we've had before. To compare, here's the vintage one up front. You can see that it is much, much bigger. If I kind of come down here a level, you can see how much higher it stands above that. It's a much bigger vehicle with a lot more features to it. To begin with, you remember we had the little compartment that came off. Well, now we've got a big compartment that opens up, and there's actually like detail in there, which is kind of nice to see. We have a drop-down ramp that drops down on what I would call the tailpiece, I guess, and you get this little prison pod inside that you can put a figure in if you would so choose to do so. Also, it has a regular ramp so that you can make it look like your figures are loading something in. Obviously, it doesn't actually go anywhere, or you can make it look like Jango Fett bumps his head. The cockpit in the front has a big piece that now opens. And you can see we've got a lot more room to hold figures in there. And you actually have a little spot up front here where you could maybe load something. You know, like Jar Jar and Carbonite. You can just put that in there so it fit. You'd think maybe they were planning for reusing this sometime. The cockpit piece. So that cockpit rotates up then, the seats inside. Trying to get a better angle on this. This is a little bit better. You can see it staying in the up motion there. Okay, the wings don't move on their own. You have to move them yourself, which is kind of lame. Now on the underneath, no handle on this one, but we have 2 bombs that you can drop. Now one accidentally dropped already on me. You just press this little button on the side and they drop. You also have firing missiles off of the back guns here. All in all, it is an awesome Slave 1. When this came out, people were wondering why the heck they put this out instead of doing a Boba Fett Slave 1. Well, I mean, when you look at it, obviously there was features put into this that are clear, made for when a Boba Fett Slave 1 would come out. But people seem to think, well, I should do the original trilogy one before they do this. We forget how big Clone Wars was at the time. I know I've met a number of people who Clone Wars is their Star Wars. So it's not too surprising that they put this one out first because it was more of a Clone Wars vehicle. And this came with a couple of exclusive figures. One was a Clone Wars rendition of Bossk. This was the only way this Bossk was available. And a Clone Wars Boba Fett, but in his kind of clone outfit, if you will. They would release a regular Boba Fett on card that looked a little different from this one. But these 2 figures were exclusive to the set. And there was also a Mace Windu and Mace Windu's droid that came with the Jedi Starfighter. It was also packaged with all of this together. It's hard to imagine, but this was about a $100 set at the time for 2 vehicles and 4 figures. Wouldn't that be nice, huh? So in 2013, we get the vintage, or neo-vintage if you want, release of Boba Fett Slave 1 with that same mold done as Boba Fett ship in a vintage-style packaging. And you can see how much they replicated the original packaging in this one, trying to copy the exact style, the exact type of figures and everything. Now, this ship is the same. It's the same as that Jango Fett Boba Fett one, if you will. Has all the same features, nothing different, even the bombs on the bottom. Mine does have a problem with wings falling off, but has the guns in the back. The cockpit opens up. I actually have a Fett figure inside there. Everything is the same. It's just a new paint job. Even on the interior, you can see same stuff. You can see the prison pod still up there. The only new piece that was really with us besides the paint job is, I talked about this a lot. We put Jar Jar and Carbonite there earlier. Well, now you can put Han and Carbonite because it comes with its own Han and Carbonite. And this Han and Carbonite mold was only produced with this vehicle. At the time, there was a new Han and Carbonite piece that was being used for the regular release of figures, but they produced a brand new one to come with this vehicle. And of course, it fits right in there. Not that that makes a whole lot of sense, because it's not like they loaded that in the front of the ship. They loaded it in the back. But still, it's kind of a cool idea that you have that. Now, as you can see on the inside, just kind of seeing the detail on the cockpit there. Pretty cool vehicle. Nicely done. This is what people were clamoring for. They were so excited when it came out, and of course, it's in a vintage box, which probably makes it better. Now, you'd think, this is the pinnacle of Slave 1. Why would you need to produce another Slave 1? At this point, we have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 6th Slave 1 to come out. It's the biggest. It's the best. It's a Boba Fett one. We have the Jango Fett one if you want. How many more do you need? Well, this is the largest release, Slave 1, with the smallest release. I don't remember which of these came first. There's a Jango and a Boba. They're both the same thing. But you can see the size difference here. This is smaller than any other Slave 1. These came out, what was it, 2014, right around in that era. And you get this tiny thing here. And Hasbro started doing smaller vehicles. They said that the production costs were too much. And they started doing... Now, it's got decent detail on the bottom here. Ooh, we'd have a date here. What year did this come out? Maybe we don't have a date. Never mind. Oh, there it is. It says 2012. Okay. I guess it came out before that. My bad. Anyway, so... it has a cockpit that opens. You see it's very dark. You can't see inside it. When you open it up, you've got room for one figure. It's not bad detail in there, but, you know, it's such a small vehicle. The wings still move. We have a firing missile here in the middle, which you press this button right here to fire. And that's it. I mean, it's a tiny vehicle. Honestly, I have both of these. Number one, because I buy them all. But I use them, well, I use this one in a diorama. This actually goes in my Geonosis diorama. And this one just goes with the rest of the Boba Fett Slave 1s, as I have them all hanging in the same spot. Definitely the smallest, definitely the worst. If you're going to get a Slave 1, don't get this one. It's, you know, it's great for one in the back. The detail, the paint detail is not near as good. It's just, it has, you know, no ramp, no nothing. It fires a missile. That's it. So, yeah, if you could find it, that's the best one to go with, for sure. So here is all of them put together. We start with this vintage mold, the Attack of the Clones mold, the Clone Wars big mold, and then the stupid tiny mold. You can see we've got 8 total Slave 1s that are produced. Now, some of these have been re-released in various places in different boxes, but it's still the same vehicle as it goes. I think even these have been re-released, which is a little crazy. I think one of these was a little harder to get, if I remember. I don't remember which one now. But it's crazy to see so many different Slave 1s, so many different sizes for a ship that really didn't appear in the movies all that much. You know, we see Fett flying after the Falcon going to Cloud City, and we see it leaving from Cloud City. And we see it in Attack of the Clones on Camino, and then going to Geonosis. That's it. And then it showed up in the Clone Wars, of course. But, you know, it's not that big a vehicle in the movies, and yet we've gotten so many different vehicles, which is still pretty cool to see all of these different ones. So I hope you enjoyed this look at the Slave 1, seeing all the different evolutions from there. It's kind of interesting to see how some features stayed on each one, and yet things changed, and even when some of the molds stayed the same, there were still some differences in there. It's kind of fascinating to see this on all these. That's the evolution of a vehicle. I know I've done the history of the AT-AT before. This is kind of my second, the history of Slave 1, if you will. I'll be doing a few more of these. I'm looking at the X-Wing right now. I kind of want to get the history of the X-Wing out at some point, so look for that sometime this summer. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, or you didn't, you can leave comments below. If you did, please subscribe. I see I'm up to 500 subscribers. I finally crossed that 500 mark. I'm pretty excited. I'll have to do something special for that, because that's pretty cool to hit 500 subscribers. So thank you all the subscribers, all the people who watch these videos. I really, I'm glad that you enjoy this and you get something out of it, because I do enjoy making these videos, getting to show off a little of my collection. Usually behind me, as you can see, more and more is getting set up in my collection. It's pretty cool. I'll have a new video probably next week showing more of my collection that is now set up. I've got some more dioramas now set up, which is pretty cool. So until next time, thank you so much for watching.